Right then, Newcastle fans are about to face their worst nightmare heading into the biggest match of the season. And before you click away, trust me when I say what's coming at the end of this video will completely change how you see Eddie Howe's future at this football club. But first, we've got two massive stories you absolutely need to know about, including some rather interesting comments from the CEO about those Saudi billions. So stick with me through all three stories because that final bombshell is going to leave you proper speechless. Story 1. Injury crisis threatens Sunderland derby. Let's kick things off with some rather worrying news on the injury front, shall we? Eddie Howe has come out and basically admitted that his squad is hanging by a thread right now. And when I say hanging by a thread, I mean it's getting proper sketchy with all these fixtures piling up. Here's the situation. Newcastle are staring down a absolutely mental schedule with Burnley at home, then a Champions League trip to Bayer Leverkusen, and then the big one, the Ware-Tyne derby against Sunderland in just over a week's time. Massive matches, all of them. But here's the problem, they're running out of players. Now, there might be some good news with Yoane Wissa potentially coming back for the Burnley match, which would be brilliant. But let's talk about who's still out, because this list is getting ridiculous. Sven Botman, still out. Nick Pope, not available. Kieran Trippier, injured. Emil Kraft, same story. And Howe's basically said that Trippier and Kraft won't be back until the Christmas fixtures start rolling in. That means Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall are going to have to play pretty much every single match. These lads are going to be absolutely knackered. Howe spoke about this at his press conference and he didn't hold back. He said Tino's doing really well, but acknowledged it's tough for him because he's playing match after match without any rest. The manager admitted they simply don't have any other options in those positions right now. Both Trippier and Kraft are going to miss the next few games at minimum, and hopefully they'll be back around Christmas to take some pressure off the lads who've been playing non-stop. Now let's think about the options Newcastle actually have here, because it's quite limited. Dan Burn can fill in at left-back when Hall needs a breather, but the problem is they need Burn in the centre of defence because Botman's still out. Fabian Schär could step in centrally, which might free up Burn. On the right side, Lewis Miley might have to do a job as a makeshift fullback. There are also some youngsters like Leo Shahar and Alex Murphy, who could potentially play on either flank, though that's a big ask. Another option would be to switch to wing-backs, and Jacob Murphy can actually play on either side, which gives them a bit of flexibility. But whatever way you look at it, Howe's going to have to be really clever with his selections. And then there's Nick Pope. He's now missed 2 matches after picking up a groin injury in training, and get this, it happened literally moments before the team sheet for the Everton match was about to be posted. Talk about timing. The expectation is he'll be out for about 3 weeks, with Boxing Day at Manchester United being the potential return date. Howe couldn't give a definite timeline, but he said it's not a serious or long-term injury, just enough to keep him out for the next 2 to 3 weeks. They're looking at Christmas time for his return, similar to several other players. If they can get him back a bit earlier, fantastic, but that's the current plan. So basically, Newcastle are going into some absolutely crucial matches with a squad that's stretched thinner than a piece of cling film. Howe's going to have to work some magic with team selection, and there's a strong possibility some players might even stay home and rest for that Leverkusen trip in the Champions League. It's all about managing these players carefully and making sure they can actually make it through this packed schedule without picking up more injuries.
Right, moving on to story number 2, and this one's quite interesting because Newcastle's CEO, David Hopkinson, has been talking about the Saudi ownership and their commitment to the club. And honestly, what he said is pretty reassuring for Newcastle fans. Hopkinson's job is to turn Newcastle into what he calls a world-class business that can compete with the big boys. Chelsea, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, all those clubs with massive revenue streams. And he's been asked directly about how committed the Public Investment Fund really is to Newcastle. Now, let me give you some perspective here. The PIF manages about £1.2 trillion in investments. Trillion. That's an absolutely mind-boggling amount of money. They're a major global player in the investment world. But here's what Hopkinson said, and this is the interesting bit. He genuinely believes Newcastle is their favourite investment. Think about that for a second. With all those trillions of pounds invested in projects all over the world, Hopkinson reckons Newcastle takes up more of their attention and care than the size of the investment would normally warrant. He says he knows this not because they tell him, but because they show him through their actions. And it's not just talk either. Hopkinson mentioned that he's speaking to the PIF every single day. Not every week, not every month, every single day. And here's a perfect example. Abdulaziz from the PIF flew in from Riyadh and spent an entire week in Newcastle. He attended a fan event at the Stack, spent time getting properly stuck into the details of how the club operates, really getting under the bonnet, as Hopkinson put it. Hopkinson also explained that there are different types of football club owners. Some are deeply connected, attending every match, involved in every decision. Others are much more hands-off and just see it as a financial investment, where they want returns but don't really care about the day-to-day stuff. And according to him, the PIF is very much in that first camp, deeply involved every single day. Now, during a fan event called We Are United, Hopkinson kept using the phrase world class when talking about Newcastle's ambitions, so naturally, people wanted to know how exactly he plans to achieve that. His answer was quite straightforward. They're not going to win by accident. They're going to win because they've been thoughtful and strategic about building an organisation whose sole purpose is winning. But he also admitted there are gaps right now. There are world-class talents in various positions that don't currently work at Newcastle. He mentioned they'll soon be looking for a chief strategy officer and a chief marketing officer. With Pete Silverstone's departure, they're also reconsidering whether they need someone focused exclusively on revenue. Pete used to oversee both marketing and revenue, but they're planning to split that up and do things differently. Hopkinson was quite honest about wanting to recruit world-class talent for these positions, and apparently it's working. He had 2 conversations just yesterday with people saying they can see where Newcastle is heading and they want to be part of it. They see it as a rocket ship and want to get on board. Interestingly, both of these people are from overseas. He gave one specific example of where Newcastle isn't world-class yet, their digital ecosystem. He said quite openly that their digital and data capabilities aren't where they need to be, and achieving their ultimate ambition won't be possible without world-class digital capabilities. So that's something they're going to build up. What's quite refreshing about all this is how honest and straightforward Hopkinson is being. He's not pretending everything is perfect. He's identifying where the weaknesses are and laying out a clear plan to fix them. And knowing that the PIF is so deeply involved on a daily basis, rather than just being distant investors, that's got to be encouraging for Newcastle supporters.
Right, here we go then, the big one. The story that's going to get everyone talking. Simon Jordan, former Crystal Palace owner and TalkSport pundit, has doubled down on his belief that Eddie Howe will never win the Premier League at Newcastle United. And before all the Geordies start throwing things at their screens, let me explain what he's actually saying here. Now, Jordan's opinion on Howe has actually changed quite a bit. He used to be a proper skeptic about the Newcastle manager, but he's now a convert. He rates Howe highly and acknowledges what he's achieved on Tyneside has been nothing short of remarkable. The journey from being relegation certainties to Champions League regulars has been incredible. Winning Newcastle's first domestic trophy in 70 years, that League Cup triumph, cemented Howe's legacy as an all-time great at the club. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite all that respect for Howe, Jordan still doesn't believe he'll be the one to lead Newcastle to Premier League glory. And crucially, he says this isn't because of any inability on Howe's part. Jordan's argument is actually about the financial restrictions, specifically PSR, profit and sustainability rules. He reckons Howe's hands are tied by these regulations. His exact words were pretty blunt. How can he? Who's going to give him that opportunity? You're not going to get another Leicester anytime soon. And he's got a point there, isn't he? Leicester's Premier League win was a once-in-a-generation miracle. The league isn't set up for that kind of fairy tale anymore. The big clubs have too much financial power, and the PSR rules make it really difficult for clubs like Newcastle to compete at that level, even with wealthy owners. There's also been a debate on TalkSport about whether Howe gets an easier ride from the media compared to Tottenham's Ange Postecoglou. Both clubs have the exact same points total after 14 games, yet the criticism seems to land differently. Jordan defended Howe on this point. He argued that Howe has done more at Newcastle than has been achieved at Spurs in recent times. He pointed out that Newcastle came from a position where fans were deeply grateful for anyone who wasn't Mike Ashley. Howe took them from what looked like certain relegation in his first season, stuffed them into the Champions League the following season and won a trophy. He doesn't think it's about Howe being English that gives them an easier time. He thinks it's about the fact that Newcastle had been asleep as a football club for so long. They went through 14 years of absolutely loathing their owner, Mike Ashley. Now they've got this new wave of optimism, and Howe has galvanised a forward-moving club with decent football, proper aspirations and actual silverware. When Howe himself was asked about his 4-year anniversary at the club earlier this month, his answer was quite humble and realistic. He said that from the minute they walked in, he probably wouldn't have predicted he'd still be in the manager's seat 4 years later, even though he'd hoped he would be. He acknowledged the volatility in football. There's no guarantee of anything in this game. He's very proud to still be in the position and managing the team going forward,
But he also recognised there's a flip side. Newcastle have work to do in the Premier League, and he's well aware they've got a big task ahead of them. So, what does all this mean? Well, Jordan's essentially saying that the system is rigged against clubs like Newcastle, even with all that Saudi money behind them. The PSR rules mean they can't just spend their way to the title like Manchester City could when they were first taken over. They have to be smarter, more strategic, and frankly, a bit lucky. Does that mean Howe can't win the league? Who knows really? Football has a funny way of surprising us, but Jordan's argument is that the structural barriers are just too significant. It's not about Howe's quality as a manager, Jordan's made that clear. It's about the financial straitjacket that PSR puts on clubs trying to break into that elite level. The question Newcastle fans need to ask themselves is this: if the system makes it virtually impossible for Howe to win the league, does that mean they should look for a different manager? Or do they stick with someone who's brought them success, stability, and genuine progress, even if the ultimate prize remains out of reach? So, there you have it. 3 massive stories that paint quite the picture of where Newcastle United are right now. You've got an injury crisis that could derail their season, a CEO promising world-class ambitions with Saudi backing that's more committed than any of us realised, and a brutal but honest assessment that the Premier League title might be an impossible dream under the current financial rules. The injury situation is genuinely concerning with that Sunderland derby looming large. Howe's going to have to pull off some tactical masterstrokes just to get through the next few weeks, but knowing that the PIF is as committed as Hopkinson says they are, that's got to provide some comfort for the long term. As for Simon Jordan's comments about Howe and the title, well, that's the conversation that's going to dominate the pubs and the message boards, isn't it? Is he right that the system is rigged against Newcastle? Or will Howe prove everyone wrong and find a way to beat the odds? What do you reckon? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the injuries will cost Newcastle in the derby? Are you encouraged by what the CEO said about the PIF's commitment? And most importantly, do you agree with Simon Jordan that Eddie Howe will never win the Premier League at Newcastle United? Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because things are moving fast at Newcastle right now and you don't want to miss a single update. We'll be back tomorrow with more news, more analysis, and hopefully some better injury updates. Until then, how are the lads?